Thank you so much for joining us today, Congresswoman. Now, tell me, of course, we know today's a big day for the Bronx. Former President Donald Trump is coming here to have a rally in our borough, and we know that a lot of people believe that he's doing this to try to garner support amongst Black and brown voters in the Bronx. And some of our local leaders have been welcoming him, others not so much. What's your take?
You know, I think what we're seeing happen right now is largely an attempt to really trick a lot of our local community into providing a lot of financial support to the president. He has these very steep legal fees that he is racking up here in New York City court, New York State court. And I think what is important is that we stay focused on the issues and the priorities that are most important to us. Making sure that we're expanding healthcare to more Bronxites and people across the city. Making sure that we're having good, dignified jobs, high wages. Taking on a lot of this price gouging that large corporations are pursuing here. And making sure that we're also addressing our housing crisis. None of which the former president has a plan for, but something that we're actively fighting for and pursuing for our community.
We know a lot of those issues near and dear to our viewers here on News 12. Leading up to this rally, we have been speaking to Bronx residents all week, getting their feelings about it. And one thing that I've heard personally out in the field from Bronx residents is that they might not necessarily be Trump supporters, but it does mean something to them that he's coming to the Bronx.
Absolutely.
Particularly being that he's the first presidential candidate in around 8 years to do so. Do you think more presidential candidates need to focus on the Bronx?
Oh, absolutely. I know that, as you said, the last candidate was 8 years ago. That was when Senator Bernie Sanders came to the South Bronx in St. Mary's Park. And it was profoundly important because before then, the last presidential candidate was Bobby Kennedy back in the 60s. And I think this is an important moment for the Bronx to assert our importance, to assert the fact that we are a voting bloc, that we do have needs that need to be met, and that we should be organizing for our needs and for our issues to be addressed.
The local vote matters so much here, especially. One of the big issues we're imagining and expecting to come up at the rally is, of course, the influx of asylum seekers here in the city.
Yes.
Mayor Eric Adams has repeatedly said that the city needs more support from the federal government to handle this issue. Is that support coming from Capitol Hill?
It absolutely has been coming, and it's something that I've been proud to work on. I have co-hosted a federal delegation of members of Congress into New York City to tour what is going on, and we've been able to secure millions of dollars, federal dollars, into the city to help us address the issue. And thankfully, I do think a lot of that help has been coming, and we, of course, are always looking to do more as well.
Yeah, should they anticipate any more of that support coming?
I think right now, if Democrats take back the House in November, it's certainly something that we intend to fight for.
Yes. And I do, of course, have to ask you about the exchange with Marjorie Taylor Greene. And we know that, in spite of so many important issues this election season, there seems to be so much focus on that exchange between the two of you. A Pew Research Center poll last year found that 8 in 10 Americans feel that politicians are more focused on fighting each other than solving problems. What are your thoughts? Do you feel this is a distraction from some of the real issues at hand that you mentioned?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that's important is what that moment demonstrated. There was an actual vote that happened by the Republican majority in the committee to allow this kind of rhetoric to be used against other members. And it's not so much that a person decided to go to that place in disrespecting Representative Crockett, but also that it was sustained, that it was supported, that kind of attack was supported. And so there's two conversations to be had here. One is making sure that we are respecting these rules of decorum and debate in the House, but also it is not lost on me that it was a freshman Black female member of Congress that was targeted in this attack. And there has long been an expectation that when something like that happens, particularly towards a member like Jasmine Crockett, that she would just sit there in silence and accept the indignity of that respect. And so I think it's very important to also correct when we see that kind of bullying behavior go on, and to cite the rules that were being, and demand accountability and enforcement of those rules.
What has the aftermath of that been like? Have you spoken to Representative Crockett about this since?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, I think that one of the things that we're focused on is trying to negotiate and work with the Republican chair who allowed this to happen, to try to say, listen, we all need to pitch in and go back to a bipartisan consensus. But once again, we can't just allow it to be a culture of bullying and misogyny either.
And last week, your office announced that you requested federal funding for 15 community projects, pivoting a little bit to these bigger issues. Now, one of those projects is to improve the criminal justice system through, quote, holistic defense. Tell me more about that. How's it going to benefit Bronxites?
Yes, so one of the things that we have found in some of our past community funding projects is we've started to really tackle how do we actually reduce crime? How do we actually increase public safety? And so we partnered with Jacoby Hospital in the last couple years to fund the Stand Up to Violence program, where we have violence interruption, where we bring social workers, mentors into the community. And we actually found that it was one of the most effective ways to reduce reoccurrence of crime here in the Bronx, more than 50%, by more than 50%. And so we're taking some of those initial results, we're bringing them across the borough in order to actually use evidence-based techniques to stop the reoccurrence of crime.
Yeah, and as you mentioned that, there's no question that public safety is a hot topic issue for many voters in the Bronx, and particularly one thing we constantly hear about from our News 12 viewers is subway safety within our public transit system. For you as a New Yorker, how do you feel about the public transportation system? Do you feel safe taking the subway?
Yeah, I think that first of all, as a woman riding the subway, this is just always something that we're very conscious of, no matter what is happening. And so I want to just, I think it's important to speak to that. But I do think that what is also important, what also makes us feel safe, is when these transit systems are working, right? When the trains are running on time, when they're running frequently, when there are enough people staffed at the MTA to have eyes out, when the platforms are clean. All of this actually does contribute to the level of safety that we feel on the trains as well. And so I think when we talk about a holistic approach, I think that that's something that we really are trying to advocate and fight for, because all of this stuff adds up. These trains, they slow down, then there's lots of people waiting for them, there's increased tension and frustration. And so the infrastructure investments are just as important as any other in making sure that the subways are safe.
Yes, and one of the things Mayor Eric Adams has spoken about as well regarding public safety in the subway system is the difference of the perception of crime versus the reality of how much crime is happening. And you mentioned like feeling safe. So we know that New Yorkers maybe might see the statistics are not as bad as they think, but that doesn't change how they feel.
Right. And that's, I think, so much of what I think is important for us to discuss. If you're sitting at a train station and the lights are out, if a light bulb is out and it's dark and the last train hasn't came 10 minutes ago and the next train won't come for another 10 minutes.
A lot of our viewers have been there.
And it's dirty and that doesn't feel safe. And living in that every day, even if nothing happens to you, it doesn't feel safe, it doesn't feel secure, and in fact, it is less safe, right, when you don't have that visibility. And so that, I think, is in making the investments in our city. That's why making investments in our healthcare matters. That's why making sure that our libraries stay open and that we don't have budget cuts towards our libraries matter, because these are places and ways and investments that not only make us feel safer, but actually do make us safer as well.
And if there was one maybe message that you would want to send to Bronx residents ahead of this upcoming election season, ahead of today's rally, what's something that you would want them to know and to keep in mind this year?
I think it's important to stay fully engaged in our entire process, right? Don't wait until November to vote. We have primary elections, regardless of your party. Primary elections are happening in just about a month, June 25th. And for communities that reliably vote for either a Democrat or a Republican, your primary election is really who you're choosing to send. And so I would definitely encourage people to look at who's on their ballot in a couple of weeks, vote, participate in your primary, organize and think about an issue that matters to you, and hopefully vote in November as well.
Here on News 12, we say local elections lead to local change. Our motto is local matters. So thank you so much, Congresswoman, for joining us today. It means so much to our News 12 viewers to have someone like you who they see every day on Capitol Hill here in our studio talking to our viewers about the issues that matter most to them.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.